Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American.
Our next guest is Mary Jeanne Packer, whose company produces some of the finest maple syrup, and also, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to love this, has a unique bourbon-infused product. She is also an official of a very interesting maple syrup organization. Mary Jeanne, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here.
Hi, Mary Jeanne. This is Jeanne. Oh, so go ahead, Don. Sorry.
There we go. No, I was just about to say, and it's all yours.
Oh, thanks, Don. Hi, Mary Jeanne. Really welcome to the Food and Wine Insider. Thanks so much for being with us today. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you. Wonderful to be here.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your current experiences and then experiences that you've had over some period of time. If I have it correct, since 2010, you've headed sales for Mapleland Farms, and as Don mentioned in the intro, you all make a bourbon barrel-aged pure maple syrup. Can you tell me why you do that?
Well, first, let me just tell you a little about it, and then the why will follow. Bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup is just as good as it sounds. We take a barrel that used to have bourbon in it, and while it's still damp with the bourbon, we put our very best maple syrup in it and let it sit. We roll it around once a week for 3 or 4 months, and then we take it out of the barrel and filter it, because inside the barrel is little pieces of charcoal, and then bottle it. The flavor is just amazing. It's still maple syrup. There's no alcohol in it. It's just flavored slightly with a little bit of the smokiness of bourbon, maybe a little extra sensation of sweetness, even though it's still just pure maple syrup. Folks have gone wild for it. It's great as a dessert topping, like on creme brulee or bread pudding. It's wonderful as a marinade for a ribeye steak. The number of uses go on and on. A lot of people do some special waffles, dessert waffles, main course waffles with barbecued chicken or pulled pork, and then a little bit of this as a topping. It's just amazing.
Awesome. Can you recount for us a bit of a story about David and Terry Campbell and the farm and how you got involved with it?
David and Terry are brothers, and when they were little boys, their mom and dad were dairy farmers, but their mother, Pearl Robertson Campbell, her mom and dad were maple syrup makers, and so at a young age, the boys would go over to Grandma and Grandpa and help with the sugaring. And they were in 7th and 8th grade, David and Terry, when they read an article in one of those farm magazines that come out every week that said someday there will be such a demand for maple syrup that it'll be a real crop. It won't just be something farmers do in the winter to keep busy. It's going to be a real crop, and there's going to be a real demand. And David and Terry said, well, why wait till someday? Let's start right now. They convinced their dad, who was a very frugal man, James Campbell, convinced Jim to lend them $600, which in 1972 would be the equivalent of today, your kid asking you for $6,000, not $600. But he believed in them in this article, and that they knew what they were doing because of Grandpa Robertson. And so they got their $600, and they bought 600 buckets and started their commercial operation. Their first customers were the school bus driver, the people who sat by them at church, the ladies who got their hair done at the same place their mom did. You know how any small business starts. And what's especially charming is I meet some of these people still. So 45 years later, here comes some 80-year-old guy into the sugar house in March when we have our open house, and he says, well, I've been their customer for 45 years. I was their school bus driver, and I used to buy a box of candy from them every Friday.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And tell us a little bit about what you do for them.
Well, I help with their national sales. As the company got bigger and bigger, their focus remained on quality control and production, employee management, all those things that a growing agricultural business needs to focus on. But one thing that they didn't really have much was somebody setting them up at trade shows, meeting corporate customers, and I took the opportunity to come and work for them at that time, and it's certainly way more than a job. I do really love helping this business grow and prosper.
So where can people find the Mapleland Farms? What accounts are key accounts for them?
Well, probably our best known account, if you have listeners in New York City, is they can find it right in their home. All they have to do is go online to Fresh Direct and order Mapleland Farms maple syrup or Fresh Direct brand. We bottle for them with a private label.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Also,
go ahead.
Also in New York City, the two stores of Agata and Valentina carry our maple syrup, and again with their private label. Upstate, people can find us in a number of the Price Chopper supermarkets, and in the Capital Region in ShopRite and Fresh Market as well.
Wonderful. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the boys sold the dairy farm. Is that right? And they expanded in terms of maple trees?
You've got the whole story. In 2005, they sold the cows, and now we use the cow barn to store drums of syrup. It's nice and cool and filled with concrete. It's the perfect spot to temperature control your syrup. And our syrup's as happy as the cows were in that space.
You know, there's some misperceptions about maple syrup and the tapping of trees. What would you say about you know, the fact that, you know, you tap trees for maple syrup, and is it a bad thing for the tree? And just talk a little bit about that so people are a bit more educated about maple syrup.
Okay. Well, for starters, what comes out of the tree is maple sap. It's mainly water, about 98 or 99% water. And that's what we gather and bring back to the sugar house and boil down in a process called evaporation. And when we're done, a maple syrup is 67% sugar and only 33% water. It's quite a evaporation process. We also use equipment called reverse osmosis that helps get some of the water out before we ever put it on to boil in the evaporator. But as to tapping the tree and the sap, if you think of it in your body as when you give blood, the spot where you gave the blood, when the needle comes out, heals up. Maybe you put a Band-Aid on, maybe you don't. And you're still fine. After you give blood, it's not like you're drained of blood. You've just given some blood. This very same thing with the maple tree giving the maple sap. And
so how many gallons of sap that are required to make 1 gallon of syrup?
Figure anywhere from 40 to 50 or even 60 gallons, depending on the sugar content of the sap when it comes out of the tree.
which is kind of amazing. That's a lot of gallons, and it makes maple syrup something quite precious, actually. I think I also read that each tablespoon of maple syrup has 21 milligrams of calcium, 35 milligrams of potassium, only 2 milligrams of sodium, and small amounts of iron and phosphorus, and a trace of B vitamins. And each tablespoon has only 50 calories per serving. So what do you like to tell people they should use maple syrup instead of?
Instead of white sugar, there's corn syrup. Maple syrup is the absolutely most of all the sweeteners, even compared to agave or honey, largely because of the concentration of minerals in the syrup that comes during the boiling process, just like there was the concentration of sugars through boiling, the same with concentrating the minerals. So there's absolutely not a more healthy sweetener available today than pure maple syrup. There have been several studies done as to the wholesomeness of it, and they all point to it being the best of all the sugars for you and your family.
Wonderful. What for you have been the major challenges in running a maple syrup company and really distinguishing yourself from all the other producers with retailers and specialty shops?
Well, the challenges of running a maple syrup business, I think we share with our fellow maple producers, and that have a lot to do with the weather. It's a weather-dependent business, and whenever you're in business that depends on certain weather conditions, it's always going to be a challenge.
Okay.
As far as how to position Mapleland Farms pure maple syrup, our real competition is not other maple farmers. In fact, we work pretty closely with our neighbors, with other maple farmers, and we don't see them as our competitors. The real problem are a couple of gals that are just, they're not who they say they are. And Aunt Jemima and Mrs. Butterworth, those gals are not maple syrup. They're maple flavored syrup. And that is our competition right there.
Right. No, absolutely. Excellent point. You're also involved, and I think this gets to your point about other maple syrup producers, is you're also very involved in the Upper Hudson Maple Producers Association. Can you talk a little bit about the work of that association?
So the association has been around for about 40 years. And some of our founders, in fact, are still active in the organization, which is very cool to have that kind of corporate history, if you will. We, the Upper Hudson Maple Producers, have come together to promote a big open house event that we all do in March, and it's called Maple Weekend. And during that time, we open our sugar houses, and people can come and see firsthand how pure maple syrup is made, meet the producers and their families, take a walk in the woods. Quite a few of us also serve a pancake breakfast or have some other maple products to taste. It's really a fun time, and no one producer could market themselves alone, but by all of us working together, we're able to mount quite a great advertising campaign and really draw a lot of people out to our farms on those weekends.
That's fantastic. And how many maple syrup manufacturers are there in the Upper Hudson area?
We're a 6-county region, And there's probably well over 100 maple farms in those 6 counties, and we have about 65 members of the Upper Hudson Maple Association in the region.
And Mary Jeanne, what do you do specifically with the Upper Hudson Maple Producers Association?
I help coordinate their advertising and marketing campaign. So, for example, during sugaring season, if we have members of the media who have questions about the industry, they can give me a call and I can fill them in on how the season's going or anything that's happening on the farm. I help organize an annual tree tapping event that's very popular. We have the Commissioner of Agriculture attends that, and elected officials. We get quite a good turnout at that event.
Fantastic. Now, I think you're a bit of a Renaissance woman, because when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, it sounds like you're involved more than the maple syrup business. You have some other companies that you have owned and founded. Would you mind talking a little bit about some of your other interests?
No, that's all right. I do have another business that I own. It's called Battenkill Fibers Carding and Spinning Mill, and we manufacture knitting yarn for yarn companies, or also for custom processed yarn for farmers, like sheep and alpaca farmers who want yarn to be able to sell at the farm gate or at fairs and festivals. It's a whole nother industry, the textile industry, and the local fiber movement, though, is a pretty good fit with my maple job, because the two sort of go hand in hand, really, in that local foods and local fiber have many of the same customers, the same people who want to know where their food is coming from also want to know where their clothing and home decor is coming from. And we're really seeing a huge growth in that textile local fiber industry as well. In fact, just last year a group was formed called the Hudson Valley Textile Project. It covers our whole fiber shed region, and we're busy communicating about where the clothes you wear and the things you decorate your home with come from to customers in metropolitan New York.
If I read your background correctly, I think you have something to do with Christmas tree farmers as well. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and this is a busy time of year for them. I'm the executive director of the New York Christmas Tree Farmers Association. New York has about 875 Christmas tree farms, and as such ranks fourth in the nation for number of Christmas tree farms in a state. New York's Christmas tree farmers are mainly small family farms, sort of like my maple farm, and most of their customers are choose and cut or small wholesale operations, mom and pop corner stores, and the like. It ends up being about a $9 million boost to New York State's agricultural economy, though. And the trees that my members grow cover about 19,000 acres of farmland, taking carbon dioxide out of the air and emitting plenty of oxygen. Heck, an acre of Christmas trees produces enough oxygen for 18 people to breathe in the course of a year.
Well, that is something I did not know, so that is fantastic. You also are involved with you have the Christmas tree farms, but you also have the New York Tree Farm program. Can you talk a little bit about what the differences are? I'm suspecting it has to do with making sure that trees are replanted and that sort of thing, but I don't know.
The New York Tree Farm program is part of the National Tree Farm System, which is more than 50-year-old program. It's a project of the American Forest Foundation. And the American tree farm system is not about planting trees in rows or on a farm, not like Chris, it's about sustainably managed family-owned forests. And so the name tree farm is probably a little bit of a misnomer, but since it's been a name we've had all these years, it's hard to change, and so we have to just explain it when people ask. But there is a difference between Christmas tree farms and the tree farm system.
So when you say sustainable farms, can you tell me what some of the programs are for the New York Tree Farm program?
Well, interestingly, sustainably managed forests don't mean old growth forests. It means forests that are managed according to a management plan, and that management plan can include managing for a variety of different uses: clean air, clean water, fish and wildlife, and timber. So included in a management plan are plans for harvesting timber from the land, and that is a big part of what the tree farm system does, is help connect forest owners and foresters, the people who can advise them on the best ways in which to manage their forests for getting the return they're looking for, be it the return they want in wildlife viewing opportunities or hunting opportunities or in timber opportunities.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Something I had no idea was going on, but it sounds obviously terrific in terms of what we need to do, which is making sure that our environment remains sustainable and that we can continue to enjoy it and manage it properly. Don, do you have any questions for Mary Jeanne?
I'm just blown away by when do you sleep? That's my first question. I guess my questions have more to do. I live in New Jersey, which is called a garden state, and people often forget how much of a garden New York is. But what are some of the problems facing farm people in New York that you try to ameliorate in some ways?
Well, a couple of the big challenges to New York agriculture aren't unique to maple or unique to Christmas trees or unique to sheep farming. They're challenges that face all farmers. The cost of labor is a very big issue. Growing crops or getting crops harvested and brought to market is very labor intensive. So regardless of the industry, access to good help and the cost of paying that help is definitely a big issue. Another challenge we're facing, and most farmers are, is we're not getting any younger. The average age of a farmer in New York State is 57. We're working hard on finding ways of retaining kids on the farm or interesting the next generation, even if they aren't farm kids, in farming. And that's why supporting agricultural education in our schools is such an important thing for all New Yorkers to be doing. And we're at Mapleland Farms very proud to be supporters of the Greenwich, New York FFA, and FFA stands for Future Farmers of America. And they have actually developed a maple program in their FFA where high school kids are experiencing what it takes to make maple syrup. And we're really proud of what those kids have learned and accomplished, and we're also really proud to be able to support them in those efforts.
Well,
Mary Jeanne, go ahead, Don.
Go ahead. No, and you first. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask: Are you seeing in any of the industries that have to do with farming, or obviously agriculture, move towards organic, and what are the challenges faced in terms of doing that?
Organic is a certification system that in many cases just recognize farmers for doing a very good job at what they're already doing. And it just involves a third party coming onto the farm and certifying or verifying that they are farming in an environmentally sensitive and sustainable manner. A new program here in New York State that we're all very pleased to be a part of is the New York Grown and Certified program. It's probably the most robust state certification program out of all 50 states. Commissioner Richard Ball, who is a farmer himself, has taken a lead in developing this program. And what it means to us as maple farmers or Christmas tree farmers is just tremendous in terms of the verification that it brings, the assurance it gives the customer that a New York Grown and Certified branded product that they're bringing into their home is safe, is clean, is grown on a farm in a sustainable manner. It's really a very, very good program, and we're delighted that it has been established and delighted to be a part of it.
Could you repeat what that is again? I didn't quite catch it.
It's called New York Grown and Certified.
Grown and Certified.
Grown, Grown.
Grown and Certified. Awesome.
Yes. And you can go online and learn about New York Grown and Certified and the standards for being part of it.
Fantastic.
And we get to ask one more question. This has been a really fascinating interview. We started out with bourbon and maple syrup, and we've gone all over the place.
Yes, no, absolutely. You have also something that I don't think has anything to do with New York, but it's called the Alabama Black Belt Heritage Area. Could you talk just a little bit briefly about that?
Years ago, I was part of a consulting group that was retained by the state of Alabama to analyze the potential for tourism in one of the state's poorest regions called the Black Belt. And it's called that because of the soil. The soil is a very rich black dirt soil. In many years ago, that's where many plantations were and a lot of cotton was grown because of that rich soil. More recently, the region is known for the Selma to Montgomery National Scenic Byway, which, of course, just celebrated a big 60-year landmark recently from when people who wanted the right to vote organized and marched from Selma to Montgomery to the state capital. So the Alabama Black Belt Heritage Area seeks to become part of the National Heritage Area system and have those unique attributes of that region where nature, history, and culture have all kind of come together to tell an important part of rural America's story. It's a story of transformation, a story of reconciliation, a story of land conservation. It's really a spectacular place on the land, and one that I truly enjoyed working in and working for to help them come together and form a heritage area and apply for national recognition.
Wow, that's really fantastic. And something I did not know. But I think we have probably run out of time, so I'm going to turn it back to Don.
Mary Jeanne, your websites again where people can reach you?
It's maplelandfarms.com. Make sure you put an S on farms. We have more than one. maplelandfarms.com.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a very, we went one way and we learned a lot more. Thank you so much.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Edible artisan candles are the brainchild of architect/mom Loree Sanders, who's here today to talk about how one birthday need turned into a highly successful food business. Loree, welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your product on your website, and then Ann's going to take it from here.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for the introduction, Don. You are right that I have a master's in architecture. I practiced for a short time, and then I actually got out of the workforce and to raise 3 sons. And as I was the person that was really excited about any kind of activities in the house that were hands-on sort of artistic projects, and that included cooking and baking and having fun with their birthday parties. And so, it would mean the making invitations together, anything that there was that had sort of a creative opportunity, I was all in. And as Graham, my youngest son, was celebrating his 12th birthday, that was sort of the last hurrah in our household of being welcome as parents at the birthday party. After that, my boys didn't want a lot to do with us. And it was also a time that I had been thinking about how to get back into the workforce in some capacity outside of the volunteer work and other things that I had been doing. And over the years, I had taken very small steps towards something or another, and I would sort of back out when it either required a lot more investment or a lot more compromise or a lot more input from somebody else that, something that I wasn't able to do myself. And so as I was watching Graham's face behind, these glowing candles of this beautiful cake that we had baked together, and I'm watching the wax candles drip onto the cake, and I just thought, well, that's a little detail that feels all wrong, and it seems like how hard could it be to create edible candles? I mean, that was really the extent to my thinking about bringing a new food product to market. So that's where it began. It's sort of, I wouldn't have hired myself as an architect because I had been out for so long, but I did want something that I could more or less do myself that was creative, and it was also seemed to fit a need. I mean, not a huge need, but a little niche in the marketplace where it feels like everything in our surroundings has been tweaked and improved upon and optimized, and here were these lowly birthday candles still ruining the cakes upon which they sat. So the beginning was really, is this something that I can do on my own? What does it take? What does an edible candle look like? And so I signed up here in Chicago. We're lucky enough to have some terrific educational institutions, and I found a couple of classes at the French Pastry School and at the Chocolate Academy. And I learned how to temper chocolate. What does it mean to work with chocolate? Who makes custom molds? How would I package something like this? And at the same time, I talked to local bakeries, just people that were sort of not far from where I lived, who had been in business a long time. And I said, what do you think of this idea? How much do you think people would be willing to spend on something like this? How many candles in a box do you think you could sell? I mean, just very anecdotal and sort of the bare bones information that I needed to get a product to market. And it was a very, very steep learning curve. It took a couple of years really before I had a product. And even then it wasn't packaged. It was just something that could function. And getting to that point outside of the class experiences, I also just met people along the way, and someone else would steer me towards somebody else. And there were a few moments where I just got extraordinarily lucky. One of them being I'd been using a product from a pastry supply company, and I really found that I wasn't using it correctly. It was a colored cocoa butter, and as my sample products sat on the shelf for sort of weeks and then months, I noticed that the color seemed to be draining from the cocoa butter, and I thought, well, that won't last as a shelf-stable product. And I called the company and just got really lucky that day that the owner answered and was super curious. Why are you using so much colored cocoa butter? Nobody uses it that way. And I explained that I was making edible candles, and he was super excited about that idea. And he sort of helped me along the journey. Well, are we making your molds? And then he had different ideas on how to do that. So there was a lot of serendipity with this project as well. I guess I didn't get to the website part.
Okay, no, I think you actually answered probably my first 4 questions, so I'm going to have to come up with some more questions. Well, Loree, thank you again for being on the show. I looked at your candles, and while, yes, they're made of chocolate, they really are artistic wonders, and I loved hearing your story about knowing how to work with chocolate and so on, but they're also unbelievably well designed. How did you come up with the design of the candles and the way that they're just, I thought maybe it was part of your architectural background, but tell us a little bit more about the designs themselves, because they're pretty exciting.
So thank you very much. As I was starting, as I said, the first things that I did experimenting, I mean, literally I took string and dipped it in chocolate the way, I had learned in 3rd grade to make regular wax candles like a pioneer, in the pioneering unit. And that doesn't work. So at a certain point, I was, I had my whole calendar free, and I would sort of spend the day experimenting. And eventually I hit a wall where I just couldn't get any farther on my own. And my husband was like, there's no reason to think that you have to do every single thing by yourself. There are people in this world that are dedicated to consulting with confectioners. Let's find you one. And so that was the first real money that we spent. We did find, not far from where we live, a confectionery consultant. And one of the things that they helped with, there were a few things that I had asked them to deliver, but before they even got started, the initial meeting, the president of the company said to me, you don't need to use chocolate molds to do your experiments. You could try ice cube trays. Silicone ice cube trays. And that was sort of, a big light bulb. And he said, and you could hang the wicks by stringing skewers or a pencil, and then sort of just lay the wicks on top so that they could rest there until the chocolate hardens. And that actually freed me up to do a lot more experimenting. And some of the first candles that I made were actually, I think, lovely. They were these very large cubes. And then I was separately molding what I called a plug. And so I had these cubes of chocolate, and then I had these little shapes that I was making with this cocoa butter. This was this ginormous amount of colored cocoa butter that I was using, and I was molding them into star shapes and different things, and then plugging those separately molded pieces into the chocolate cubes. And they looked, I don't know if you remember those candy bars called Chunkies.
Sure.
Anyway, so they looked almost like petit fours. They were beautiful, and they would burn forever because I had such a huge quantity of cocoa butter for this wick. You could sing happy birthday until the cows came home. And even though it functioned, it wasn't something that you would want to put on top of a cake. It sort of was a standalone piece, but it was a little bit useless as far as the marketplace was concerned. So I didn't start with where I have ended is sort of the long and short of it. Then, as I told you, I inadvertently or accidentally, serendipitously hooked up with this pastry supply, company owner. And he suggested, hey, I can create molds for you that are almost like tubes, and you can pipe the chocolate into the tubes, and then you can blast it out with an air compressor. And so I did some long tube-shaped candles that were also lovely. They sort of were marbleized, like I was tempering white chocolate and dark chocolate together and piping them into these tubes. And they were beautiful, but they were extraordinarily labor-intensive. And so that wasn't really something that I thought I'd be able to scale. So I just sort of kept taking baby steps towards something that I could not only make, but I thought I could scale. And so that man who created the tubes for me, ultimately there was a long step in between where a former client of my dad's, who makes solar panels and all kinds of other, small needles, they had the equipment that he thought, well, they could probably make you a temporary mold to just get you going. And in fact, they did make these small little, one at a time molds to get me closer to the shape and size that I thought would work. But that was a little bit the blind leading the blind. I didn't understand how a mold has to have draft. It has to have a certain angle so that as the chocolate crystallizes, it shrinks some, and then it needs to be popped out of the mold, but it needs to be popped out in a way that's going to be efficient over time. So, I just kept moving and moving, and then I ended up with these what were called gang molds. They were sort of these small, almost square-shaped molds that held 6 of the candles in the shape that I now make. It's sort of almost like the Washington Monument. So or like an upside down, very narrow pyramid. So it's maybe a 1/4 inch square at the bottom and maybe a 1/2 inch square at the top, and it's about 3.5 inches tall are the candles that I've been making. And so these silicone molds that I was using would make 6 candles at a time. They were these gang molds, and up until just this summer, I have still been hand tempering the chocolate, piping each mold, cutting the wicks by hand. Literally, this has been a one-woman show this whole entire time until I am just transitioning to a co-manufacturer who delivered the first pallet of candles just in time for me to participate in the one-of-a-kind show last weekend. So it's an evolution in progress. In order for the co-manufacturers to make the candles, I needed to invest in brand new chocolate molds, which were polycarbonate 2-piece magnetic molds. So it was a different process that I'm incredibly excited about. And buying those molds was kind of like buying a new car. It was a very big leap in investment and faith.
There's always a challenge when you produce something that has never existed before. I mean, most entrepreneurs, they find a co-packer first. In your case, there probably wasn't a contract manufacturer that could make this product. You had to have all this experimentation, all this learning, and it is indeed the challenge of being able to scale your production that you talked about. So it was absolutely perfect to hear the story. And I'd be curious to know what advice you would give someone who might have thought about your type of product. If you had to do it over again, what might you have done differently?
It's funny. I think one of the main things that I would have done, and I don't know that I would have been able to find the person, but I think doing this solo has actually been one of the most challenging parts of a very challenging journey, because I really have been making it up as I've gone along, and There's a lot of times when things seem really obvious to me. Just the idea of edible chocolate candles just seemed like such a no-brainer. And then I would say to people, I'm working on edible chocolate candles, and they're like, you should go on Shark Tank. That's the best idea. And then what I found is people aren't going into stores looking for edible chocolate candles. And if you say these are chocolate candles, people say, oh, they smell like chocolate. And so there's this huge learning curve to the public for what it is that I'm doing. And so I feel like, you know, I'm not even really answering your question, am I? Sorry.
No, you are. No worries.
Okay. So I think having a partner who had a completely different skill set would have been very, very helpful to me, because I dove right into the design aspect. I like the hands-on cooking and making and working with a graphic designer and figuring out what the package is about. And all of the rest of the necessary business stuff is just foreign to me, and it takes me so far out of my comfort zone that I have to force myself to do some things that are very, very necessary to grow, to build any kind of a business.
Yeah, I think
so that's what I've done.
No, and that's a great lesson learned as well, because we usually find that, you know, entrepreneurs, they have these great ideas, but then they don't realize there's a whole supply chain that comes with it. And, you know, whether you're your own salesperson or ultimately you hire a broker, and then if you want expanded distribution, then you need different distributors, and your shelf life plays a role in that. So these are all things that really do happen to most entrepreneurs. So I think it's really good to hear your story. Did you have other investors in terms of the expenses of getting this business started, or was it really yourself and your family?
It's really my family. My father actually has pitched in some too. He has donated all of his legal expertise, so everything, you know, trademark, copyright, filing for a patent, all of those things were pro bono. But otherwise, yeah, it has been completely family funded.
Loree, where are your Let Them Eat candles available today?
So right now, one of the most exciting experiences that I've had along this journey is I submitted the product to a company called The Grommet. I don't know if you know that website, TheGrommet.com, The Grommet. And they launch products every day, really. And so when I submitted, they were really excited about edible chocolate candles, because it's a space that doesn't get much innovation, as we've seen. And so the candles are available on thegrommet.com, and they are also available on my website, letthemeatcandles.com, and they are also available in some stores really across the country, and those are listed on the website under brick and mortar. Okay.
And do you distribute the product yourself, or do you have someone that's distributing it?
I sure do. Nope. That is just sort of the next leg of the exciting opportunities to discover. I hadn't thought about, I need to ship a chocolate product in the heat of the summer. I need to find when I'm looking for commercial kitchen space where, you know, a shared kitchen, most of them have ovens going all day, because they rent to caterers and other kinds of food artisans, and so you can't work in a kitchen with heat as a chocolatier. So again, I have been looking for a distributor to move, you know, what is now for me a very, very large quantity, but is still in the food world a very small quantity.
So what are the ideal types of stores that should have your product?
Well, it's interesting because they have been in a lot of different stores. I first thought, bakeries and small gourmet markets were going to be the perfect home. And I still think they're a good home. There are some bakeries that are doing phenomenally well with the edible candles. But what I've found by participating in shows and other situations where I'm in front of people, the reason that the grommet launch was so incredibly successful was because it gave people the opportunity to see what it was and how it worked. First, if people just look at the package has to do this yeoman's job of explaining not only that it's a candle, but it's handcrafted, and so that's why you might be used to paying $5 or less for 2 dozen candles. Why would I want to spend $10 or $12 on 3 little candles? I don't get it. And they are priced like handcrafted chocolates are priced. They really are that labor intensive. And I think that's fair, but when you're buying a cake for $30, then you have to say, wow, $10 for just three little sticks of chocolate. That seems like kind of a lot. So there are, gift stores, I think, where people are saying, what can I need a gift. I need something to take to my friends at lunch or to put on top of another gift, just a little add-on that's a lot of fun, that's an experience as well as a product. So gift shops have been doing well, sort of galleries, spaces where people are already shopping for something that is handcrafted or really unique. And online is really doing the best job of all because you can really understand it. You can see a video of how it works, or you can see sort of pictures of other people and how they've used them.
Wonderful. Can you talk a little bit more about your relationship with the grommet? What do they actually do for you? I think it would be interesting for other people to hear that.
Absolutely. So it was from the time that I submitted until the time I actually launched took over 6 months. And part of it, their business and their business model have been changing. I was a very untested commodity, and so while they were really excited about the product, they don't do very many food products at all. They do, clothing and jewelry and tech items, things for him, things for her, toys. And so they wanted me to have 1,200 boxes in inventory was what they wanted me to have. And, here I am hand making things, and on a great day, I can kick out 60 boxes. Really, it's a very labor intensive. And so there was sort of this, I'm really excited about you wanting 1,200 boxes, but what if you think that's how many is going to sell, and then, oops, only 200 sold, and now I've got 1,000 boxes with a shelf life and nowhere to send them. That's too big a leap of faith. And so we negotiated a contract that took quite a while because we didn't want to consign them. We wanted to sell them. And so they agreed to write a purchase order for the amount that they wanted to have in inventory. And there was a lot more to the contract. It was very complicated about how much they were going to promote us and what the promotion was, what the promotions were going to look like and how long the agreement would last. And so, we sort of got all the way to the winter time. They had hoped that we would launch in the fourth quarter of 2015. And, the fourth quarter obviously is the best time to do anything because people are excited to make purchases. There's a lot of holidays and events versus the first quarter where people are all tapped out and they're really tired of spending money. So it turned out that by the time we were ready to launch, it was looking like a first quarter launch. So that was a little bit disappointing, but it was, we were still all very excited about it. And they also knew that I hadn't been shipping anything before. I had been delivering to local bakeries and stores sort of around the Chicagoland area, sort of nationwide shipping. And so they said, we will take care of the shipping for you because we know you're new and you're inexperienced at this. And what are all the instructions? And so it was trying to figure out, okay, if someone buys 1 box, 2 boxes, 12 boxes, what size envelope will it fit in? What size box will it fit in? You know, all of these different dimensions and materials. And then as I gave them the instructions and I said, you know, and then once they're going to somewhere that's over 70 degrees, it's going to need insulation and a gel pack. And they were like, whoa, we weren't thinking about that. Our warehouse doesn't work with temperature control. We need to kick the shipping back to you. And that was a huge disappointment, setback, whatever. Like at that point, I was super excited to be launching with them. I had been building this inventory. I mean, I was in really deep and there was no turning back. And I said, okay, I will do the drop shipping also. So that's what ended up happening. And, you know, I'm really proud to say that from the launch date to the first 30 days with the grommet, I sold the 1,200 boxes and they were delivered to 49 states. It was really the most exciting and gratifying experience ever.
Wow, that is extraordinarily exciting, and that's fabulous to hear. I've been told I get to ask you one more question because you've been absolutely wonderful with your story. What other ideas are you thinking about? You know, is it new flavors? Is there new areas you want to explore? What's on the horizon for you, Loree?
There definitely will be line extensions. The very first thing I want to do are number-shaped candles. So that's for sure to come. As I said at the beginning, I had just participated in the One of a Kind show, which in Chicago is a very big sort of business to consumer or artist to consumer show. And as a first-time participant, I was in the emerging markets section, which is a half-size booth, and it's sort of off in the corner. And I'm second to the grommet launch. This was really the most extraordinary experience because it was over 4 days. I sold, you know, like 600 boxes at $10 each. So, you know, I was able to make a lot of money with the $10 product. It's sort of like you hear of death by paper cut. This was sort of success by $10 bills. And it's any time in the future, if I can go back in the One of a Kind show, I will have a twice the size booth, and I most certainly will need more than just individual boxes of 3 candle, you know, $10 items. And so I had packaged these in 6-packs as like a family pack. I thought that would be something that people would be interested in, and I was kind of surprised to find that they weren't. But one of the things that people were really interested in was I had these signs as part of my booth that said, like, chocolate is always in style, or little things like that, and people said, oh, are you selling those signs? So that's sort of a direction that I hadn't initially thought about. But there are all kinds of, you know, paper products, cupcake holders, and gift wrap, and other sort of that kind of party supply stuff that initially wasn't part of my thought process, but could be interesting line extensions. You know, maybe cake mixes or other kinds of sort of tangential things like that. And the other direction I really want to take the business is I have the opportunity to customize the candles. So I could do corporate logos. I could do, you know, sorority letters. I could do Disney characters. Like, there's sort of no limit to what is possible if I get into licensing or other things like that. I'm also interested in, you know, events and things like that. So both taking the product that I have and putting them into different packaging and uses, and then also expanding into other product areas.
Well, Loree, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time spending it with you and hearing your story and the excitement about the future. And I'm sure it's all going to be wonderful. Don, do you want to close us out?
Well, we want to ask Loree your website again.
It's letthemeatcandles.com.
We've been talking with Loree Sanders. A link to her website will be on Food and Wine Insider tonight. Thank you so much, Loree, for joining us.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Food and Wine Insider.